back and have a good time this course and then 2 more weeks. So,
Good morning, Eric.
Good morning. Hey. So I got to head out now, but everyone enjoy. And Robin, thank you for doing this.
Welcome. Well, hi, everybody.
Morning. Hi.
Some of you know me or have seen me at the Bellingham Senior Activity Center. I've been going there for about 10 years at least. I served on the advisory committee. I've also been a meditation Buddhist practitioner for, I just figured out it's about 42 years. And the reason why I offered this class is a result of many iterations and thoughts about what the difficulties are in terms of meditation when all the evidence seems to suggest that it's very beneficial, very good. I know at our Shambhala Center, we're located across the street from Hagen's on Meridian Street. Every Monday night we would offer meditation instruction, and sometimes we'd have 3 people, sometimes we'd have up to 20 people coming in. But nobody ever came back. And, you know, we'd try to give the best meditation instruction we could, and it just, nothing seemed to change. And then I started giving meditation instruction to a couple people who I eventually got feedback from. And the things that they told me were really helpful in terms of what the difficulties are for meditation. So many of them said, you know, I know meditation is good. It's just, I can't do it. It just doesn't work for me. My mind is too busy, or some variation thereof. So it made me sort of do a deep dive into my own experiences and what is it that allowed me to make some of the changes in my life. When I started the MBA program back in 1972, I was really a sedentary person. I didn't exercise, but I had a dissatisfaction with that. And I tried doing a little bit of exercise, didn't really take. I read the book by Ken Cooper called Aerobics. Has anybody ever heard of that?
Heard of Ken Cooper, but not the book.
Yeah, basically it did a couple things. It did in depth described what happened to the body when a person does aerobic exercise. It laid out a way of measuring your aerobic capacity at any time, so you had a feedback system. And then it gave you points if you did certain exercises. It was a 3-prong approach. So it had a view, it gave you information, it laid a pathway, and you had a way of measuring it. And I thought, well, the end result was that I ended up becoming a long-distance bicyclist, and probably I've ridden 80,000 miles in my life. All the years that I taught at Western, I rode my bicycle. I would ride down. I had twin boys, and in a trailer, I would take them to Ferndale and back just to get my aerobic exercise. So having that foundation, it carried me through the difficult times that many of you, I'm sure, have encountered when you've tried to change certain kinds of habits or wanted to make changes. Sometimes people want to lose weight and how difficult that is. I've had a couple of sisters who've had difficulty with their weight. People who want to get in shape, whatever self-improvement. It's more difficult than we realize, I guess, initially, because of the habits that we have. Does everybody kind of understand what I'm saying? Probably that they've tried things and been more or less successful?
Yeah.
Okay. So I thought what I would do is offer, and this is a second go around with this class. I'm doing it in 3 sessions now, based as best as I understand on what it is that for people who want to consider a meditation practice, what's going to increase the likelihood that they're successful. We know that meditation's good. There's enough evidence now. You can go on and do the research. All kinds of research has been, scientific research. It used to be this niche thing that kind of weirdos like me would do, and then it's mainstream. It's taught in hospitals and all over the place. So the way I've broken these classes down is into 3 parts. One I call the view, and that's similar to what Ken Cooper's book does initially, which is to explain what actually physically happens to the body, at least from the aerobics point of view, when you do aerobic exercise. And having that view can be helpful. Knowing where you're going in a broader sense, it's helpful for carrying a person through the short and difficult times that they otherwise might use as an excuse to stop. The second part is specifically looking, when that will be next week, we'll look at the pitfalls, the specific pitfalls of meditation. And that will then come back to the view. And then last, what are some methods, some specific methods and support systems that are available that we offer at the Shambhala Center and I offer and other people offer, but also ways you can structure your practice if you want to do it at some point. And I'm not particularly encouraging people to jump right in and do meditation. This is not a class on how to meditate. It's a class on laying the foundation for you if you want to consider that as an additional part of your life. Okay?
Yep.
So that's what it's all about. And, you know, you can ask questions. That's the idea. We have 45 minutes because there's another class that follows this, so we'll have to watch time accordingly. I am recording this, so does anybody have a problem with that? I thought I would do that in case somebody would like to review it at some point, and at least we'll have it. Okay. So today is the view, and has anybody had a chance to look at my video called Meditation is the Red Pill?
I did.
Okay.
I did.
So what I'm going to do is just review that and maybe expand on it a little bit today. And essentially it lays out the view. Much of what I'm talking about comes out of the Buddhist religion, which is really kind of a misnomer because Buddhism is not, from one perspective, a religion. There's not a God that you worship in that. It's not a denial of God. It's just the Buddha is essentially telling people if you want to kind of maximize your capacity as a human being, given what you have, here are some things that I've tried and you can try them. That's kind of a gross summary of it, but it looks at our human condition and what we can do as human beings and the potential that we have and the realization of that potential. So fundamentally, this perspective starts with what is the view of human nature? What are we like? Many philosophers looked at that question. Jean-Jacques Rousseau said people are basically good. Thomas Hobbes, people are fundamentally evil and have to be controlled, you know, and then you have, based on human nature, implies then what you have to do to control that nature. And then there are others who say human beings are sort of a blank slate and whatever conditioning they have determines what they're like. So the Buddhist perspective is that human beings, we fundamentally have all we need to be fully realized. Sort of like a young child that's going to be educated. They've got the brain capacity, they know how to learn, or they can be taught to learn. They can become a fully realized human being. But we're not incomplete. We don't need somebody else as the vector for our self-realization, although in some ways we do. We need good teachers, for example. I've been fortunate to have had wonderful teachers in my life. And they've made all the difference, both in terms of schooling, but also in terms of working. I worked on a farm as a kid, in farm in Montana, and boy, did that make a difference. Okay, so if we start off with the premise that we're fundamentally good, that we're fundamentally full potential there, then the next question is, well, what's the problem? There's always a problem, because otherwise we'd all be enlightened beings, right? And obviously we're not. And the fundamental problem is mind. It's our own minds. In my video, Meditation is the Red Pill, I talked about two minds or two realities. However we've been raised, and all of the experiences that we've had have led us to both have a sense of who we are and what our capabilities are, what our limitations are, but also how the world works. And boy, you look at the great disparity, particularly right now, which is amplified between, say, the Republican perspective on how reality works and the Democratic perspective on how reality works. It's so profound. I mean, I listen to, Fox News, and I listen to MSNBC, and they're different realities. Each person has a different reality. It's the realities that we create from this perspective and this view that essentially create the limitations that we have in our own minds that prevent us from realizing our full potential. So I want to explore that a little bit more and then look at the tools that are available for addressing that. We work with a conception of ourselves and the world as a series of concepts. I call that conceptual mind or conceptual reality. We've learned how to recognize other people, the floor, the ceiling, glasses, the whole thing. And we have a mental construct of reality. And what we do is we project that construct out there and think that what we are seeing in our mind or experiencing in mind that we kind of project out there, we think that's real. Well, in a sense it is, it's our reality, but it's different for different people. And we know that. We sit down and talk with people and they say, well, how can you see it that way? Here's how I see it. And you get some indication that their inner reality and how they are seeing external things is quite a bit different than what you see it as. So, question is, how do we construct our reality? What are the pieces that lead to how we put the reality together? What I like, what I don't like, who I am, what I'm capable of, what I can't possibly do, all those pieces. So that's the question. How do we construct our own personal reality? Well, we tend to gravitate towards those things that we like. And we tend to avoid those things that we don't like. And we tend to kind of ignore so much of what's going on that doesn't seem to be relevant. So for example, I want to ask a question right now. For a moment, I want you to just sort of reflect on exactly what you're feeling, where the seat that you're sitting on touches your bottom, and feel that. Okay, you feel that? Just flash on that. Now, before I mention that, were you feeling that before? Were you aware of that? That's that's you were?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. For some
It's not
people,
comfortable.
it's what? It's not what?
Not comfortable.
Yeah, okay. That's kind of an added part. There's an experience, and then there's a commentary that we have. This I'm experiencing this, and this is not comfortable. I'm experiencing this, and this is wonderful. But there's also a raw experience before we make a judgment or before we come to a conclusion, right? So touch your fingers together and feel the two fingers touch each other, just for a moment, or hands. Take your tongue and touch the inside, the upper part of your palate, and feel that. Feel the inside of your nostrils as you breathe air in. Can you feel it? There's so many experiences that we have moment by moment, and this is just physical experiences, but also what's going on around us, that we sort of filter. We have these very strong filters that filter out what we consider irrelevant information, and it happens at the subconscious level. So the reality is we're moving through life is we're filtering out one heck of a lot of stuff. We're checking on what it is that we like, and we're sort of walking away from or moving around that which is uncomfortable or that which we don't like. And having done that for most of our life, our reality is composed of that. At least that's the way that the Buddhists teach about how we put our reality together. We're conditioned by our passion, what we like, what we find attractive, tasty, and so forth. What we want to avoid, what we avert, and then sort of the filters of shutting out the rest of the things that don't seem to be relevant. Well, obviously, when we're shutting out stuff, our experience of reality is much reduced. Okay. To liberate the mind is to experience fully what's happening with what's going on right now. Okay. So the argument is that what we do is we go through life and we have this conceptual reality, this conceptual mind that moment by moment takes over and defines who we are and defines how the world works. And it limits us. It's very limiting. It's a source of difficulty and pain. Somehow or other, this striving for a comfort and trying to avoid painful or uncomfortable situations in and of itself seems to create further problems. So the question is there a way out of this dilemma? Well, yeah, sure, there are ways. We can hate. There are hate groups. I've been kind of following this. If you have something to hate, it can provide meaning. You can come up with a strong ideology, ways of thinking. You can get super involved in things, become really busy so that you don't have to think. So there are various strategies we use to try to wend our way through through life. Excuse me, through life, so that we don't encounter these sort of mind difficulties. Well, I guess the question is, do they work? And is there some alternative way of approaching a life that might make it more meaningful, might make it more fulfilling, might pull on things from within ourselves that we didn't even know existed? So that's really what I'm looking at here. So going back, fundamentally, the argument is we have everything within us that we need. We have a mind that, through avoiding things that we don't like and reaching for things we do like and ignoring the rest, we've created a sense of the world, and we function by that. And the fundamental problem is that gets in the way, and that's sort of the third part of the full realization of who we are. So it's mind. It's how we've constructed our own worldview. I'm not saying that there aren't other sources of pain and anguish. There's so much suffering in the world right now. That's a separate question. But in terms of our own personal view of how the world works, our own unleashing our own potential, at least not having our own minds as barriers to that happening. Not circumstances. Yes, there are circumstances that prevent people from doing all kinds of things, but there are so many people who are limited. I can give you one short example. My mother was tremendously smart and interesting, but she had such a strong view on herself and her place in the world. She was depressed all the time. And it was like this genius wanting to get out, but her own mind kind of locking her in. And I discovered that fully when I took her on a motorcycle ride to Glacier National Park. I warned her about 2 months in advance, we're going to go on a motorcycle ride, and then 1 month. And then I came home and said, Mom, we're going to go. And I helped her pack, and I lifted her onto the back of the cycle, and away we went for about a week. She was in her 50s at the time, and we had this marvelous time. She suddenly became a 14-year-old girl again because she wasn't in the living situation where she was constrained by her own view of how things worked. It was like playing. We just played the whole time. It was like having a 14-year-old girl on the back of the motorcycle that was so enthusiastic about life. And the contrast was remarkable. But I removed her from the situation where she had to have a particular view of the world. Why? It's just how mind works. So in a sense, I think about my mother in that context and how creating a set of circumstances helped her liberate her own self from her mental constraints. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Jimmy Buffett says it changes in attitude and changes in latitude.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about conceptual mind and then an alternative mind, conceptual reality, conceptual mind, and the alternative mind or reality, which I call experiential reality. Because it's in working with these two realities, these two aspects of mind, that we have at least one method for kind of releasing the I'm going to call it a trap. I think I asked people if they wouldn't mind watching the movie The Matrix. And the idea that we live in our own matrix, we live in our own cocoon that we create. Excuse me. And trying to figure out a way to liberate ourselves from that. But first of all, just talking about our conceptual reality. And we've talked about how it's put together, how it's made up of concepts, man, woman, transgender, glasses, feet. I work as a handyman, so I'm using all kinds of tools, and I have a concept in my mind of the job I'm doing, and I try to carry that concept into reality. And then I had you touch into experiences. Now, it's interesting because when you first experience something, there's a moment there where all you're doing is experiencing it. And I call that experiential mind or experiential reality. When I asked you to first experience, you know, your bottom touching in on the cushion, the first thing is just an experience, but then notice how quickly the mind applies a concept like, well, this doesn't feel good, or this does feel good. It's just natural. We experience and then we judge. We experience and then we judge. We experience and we judge. So if we can just dwell for a little bit more time on our experiential reality, actually, that's a very calming thing. So if you just do has anybody ever done a body scan? I'm sure you have. You know, somebody guides you through and they say, start with your feet. Just experience starting from your toes and your soles and your arches, your ankles, and you just experience. What is the experience without judging? Knees, thighs, bottom, hips, back, shoulders, neck, eyes, eyelids. If you just do that, it actually has a calming effect because you're not having to engage your conceptual mind so much. So they're learning more, more and more, excuse me. They're learning more and more that this constant process of us feeling that we have to engage our conceptual mind all the time, judging everything is in and of itself, it really uses a lot of energy. And it, in and of itself, it wears us out. So if we can relax away from that process, it in and of itself is a helpful thing. The problem is we're hooked on it. And as you know, if you try to just sit there and just feel your body for 2 hours, it ain't gonna happen. Our mind takes over and we create all kinds of storylines and we drift away. Even trying it for 5 minutes to just dwell on just the experience without judging. Our mind, our whole storyline that we fabricated for our whole life comes in, we start generating thoughts. Our mind does that. That's just how it works. But mind is trainable. We can actually train our mind to dwell a little bit longer in just experience. Not forever, maybe 2 seconds instead of 1 second. And that's something you could, even from this point on, you could try. Just during the day, through the day, just pause for a second and say, okay, I'm going to experience my liver. And then your mind tries to reach in there and experience that. Or I'm going to experience my left thumb. Just what's the experience of that? What's the experience of my left eyelid? Touch it, hold it, and then release. So I guess your assignment for next time is to just do that a little bit and see what happens. Just create sort of islands of experiential reality where you're not judging for at least a moment. And then go back to what you're doing. Well, let's go back to our conceptual reality. I touched on it, but it's important to understand that we are addicted to it. And that's of course one of the problems that people have when they try to meditate is because the mind takes over. It comes back in, it starts generating all kinds of thoughts, and people say, well, I can't meditate because I can't slow my mind down. Well, really what's happening is the lifetime of experiences that we've created come forward. And usually there's a me in the storyline. There may be a protagonist. You may think about something else that you've experienced in the past. It's just this overpowering reinforcement that we've done all of our lives of this conceptual mind and conceptual reality that has made up our lives. Okay, so fundamentally underneath all this stuff, we have the potential to realize who we are. We have this mind that we're addicted to that's guided by what we like and what we don't like and what we ignore. We're hooked on it, literally addicted at the subconscious level to recreate it and reuse it all the time. And so how do we deal with this? How do we overcome this? And it's not really overcoming it, it's the retraining process. The vector that we have, the method that we have is actually going back to our experiences. And so when I say touch into experiences momentarily, and I mean just for a second, I don't want you to be meditating. I'm not recommending meditation right now, unless you have a meditation practice. I'm just saying touch into your experience as much as you can between now and next week. Moments. Once an hour, a couple times an hour if you can, to just stop and reflect on some raw experience and let it go. Don't make a judgment if you can, but if you make a judgment, it's okay. But recognize that there's a moment there when you're just experiencing something. Okay. That's the starting point for meditation. Just doing that. And if that's all you do the rest of your life and that works for you, that's great. If you've got an additional tool and that's a tool, then you've got it. Okay. Now, I want to add a couple of other things to the idea of conceptual mind. The reality that we experience, that we think is true, is not real. It's a projection of our mind. It's not really what's happening out there. I can tell you that, you won't believe it. We can't believe it. But it's really your projection of how you think the world works, projected out there, and we have this mechanism that says this is what's real, and I believe it, and I know it's true, and I know that this is what I'm like, and I know that this is what I'm not like. All this is happening at the subconscious level. How many of you had a chance to watch the movie The Matrix? Anybody?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, let me review just briefly for the purposes of this class. The reason I assigned the movie The Matrix is because in The Matrix, we have a situation where people are plugged into a computer program, but when they plug into the computer program, it takes over their mind, and there's a whole reality. They're really not living it, not physically, but their mind thinks that it's true. And I like that analogy because the conceptual reality, this is a hypothesis, this is an assertion, the conceptual reality is like, in certain ways, the Matrix. It's not real. It's in our mind. Now, how do we get out of that? How do we relax that strong attachment to and allegiance to and belief that what our mind projects in terms of a reality is really just our mind projection? Now, from a sort of a practice point of view, that's very helpful if you really not only believe that, but you can see it happening. You can see yourself creating your own reality. And to do that, you need to slow the mind down a little bit. meditation, I think the name of the video that I recommended called Meditation is the Red Pill references a scene in the movie The Matrix where Neo is given the option to step out of the matrix. In other words, to be able to step out of his conceptual reality that's this program and experience reality as it is. And the way that he's done that, the way that he's offered that is by taking either a red pill or a blue pill. The red pill is the method by which he can step out of his attachment to and his complete immersion in the matrix, in his own conceptual reality. The blue pill is he just goes back to sleep. He just goes back into living in that conceptual reality, that matrix. Excuse me, I got to take care of a dog for a second. Dragon, come here. Dragon. Come here.
Hey, dragon.
I've got a dragon dog, and she barks at people who pick up their vegetables. I'm the vegetable drop-off site for the neighborhood, so hopefully that's not too bad. So where were we? We're talking about the matrix and the red pill. The simple process of just touching into experience, raw experience, momentarily removes your mind, just stops the mind from creating that conceptual reality moment by moment by moment. It creates kind of a gap or a break in that. And so that's the way to penetrate our own attachment. It's not easy. It's an overwhelming task at times, but it's the way that we can do it. And through the process of meditation, what happens is you just essentially extend our involvement in non-conceptual reality, our experiential reality, make those gaps a little wider and a little bit wider and a little bit wider. And that's the goal, to not be such a slave to our own belief systems, our own conceptual reality, to be able to step outside of that. And in the case like my mother, that once she was able to step outside of it, she could be more creative, she could have much more fun, life is more joyous. Yes, it can be difficult, there's no question about it. But at least in doing that, you can live and experience life literally more fully. You don't ignore as much. You can let more in. You can experience so much more of life by doing it. So the mechanism, the tool, is just touching into what's happening with reality right now, with experience. So that's the view. And we'll come back to that and say it different ways. But I don't want to say overcome, but what we have to deal with if we want to realize our potential more fully is our own mind, the own limitations that we apply to ourselves, and it works on a subconscious level. Now, of course, modern psychology deals with this in its own way all the time. So I don't think there's any inconsistency between sort of the Buddhist perspective and modern psychology. We're just freeing up the mind. So that's the process. Now, what do we encounter? And this is a prelude to next week. What is it that we encounter when we touch in with conceptual reality, with just experiencing moment by moment what's happening, feeling our bottom on a cushion, hands on our lap, touching our fingers together. The mind wants to come back in. It just is so overpowering. So what happens is when people try to meditate, the same thing happens. How many of you have tried meditation?
Yeah.
Almost everybody has tried. And it seems it can seem pretty good for a while, but then this mind starts being busy again. It starts becoming active. And it's almost impossible to let go of the idea that you want, the purpose of meditation is to slow mind down, to stop mind. That's not the idea, actually. The idea is to be caught up in conceptual mind and our thoughts, but then break it and touch into an experiential reality. So in meditation, what you do is your mind goes away, you're thinking up a thought, and then when you recognize that your task is actually just to experience what's happening now, you come back to experience. It's this alternation between being caught up in a storyline, coming back to what's happening now. But that's the process of meditation. The idea is in no way to get rid of thoughts. You want thoughts because what you're trying to do is to create an oscillation between conceptual mind and experiential mind. And that's the way to penetrate slowly, and expose that cocoon, that there are many ways to say ego. Some people call it ego, a cocoon, a mind limiting that we have. We do that gently by just exposing it through this oscillation process between just touching in on experience, touching in on the breath, and then letting the mind go and watching how we construct the world and reality right there. So that's where we're going. It's 10:41 now, and I wanted to leave a few minutes for questions or discussion now. We don't have a lot of time, but yes, Kathy.
You mentioned that this is being recorded.
Yeah.
How can I access this to listen to it again?
I think what I do, I've recorded it on my computer, and I can actually turn it into a MP4 file and also an audio file, and I'll explore how that can be made available.
Great.
So next time I'll see what exactly, but it's probably the audio. What I find, as I recommended with my video, watch it at higher speed or listen to it at a higher speed. That helps too. Any other questions?
Well, I think there is a mechanism through the senior center that they record other of these programs, and you can, and then they put the link to that, if I understand it correctly, in their weekly bulletin.
Oh, okay. I'll check with Eric because maybe I don't have to do it and then they can do it.
Yeah, it's down at the bottom with the YouTube videos, they links.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Anything else?
Yes, I actually typed you a note on the chat thing.
Oh,
At the beginning of your lecture, you mentioned a book that I think says more about what the benefits of meditation really are. And I'm curious, because it was too quick to write down. And also, is there a book you can recommend on how to meditate? If this isn't a class on learning how to meditate, is there a book that you recommend that we could study?
there's.
And I put this in chat so that maybe you could write a response, because I
Yeah.
can't write fast enough to get the details when I'm trying to take notes.
Yeah. Why don't I put something together for next time? See what, because there are several books. There are thousands, literally thousands of videos on YouTube in terms of meditation instruction and the benefits of meditation instruction and all kinds of stuff. So between what you can read and what you can hear on YouTube, oh my God, it's an overabundance of riches. So
But I think you know the best ones, and I hate to have to look through 100 YouTube
Right.
videos to find the one or two that might be good. So if you can give us some tips, that would be great.
okay, I'll do that. Yes,
Okay.
Kevin and
I-
Ann.
We've been meditating, and I don't think you, when you say how many have tried meditation, I think we are meditating, not trying it.
Okay.
But I think the health benefits immediately are, I think I've read someplace that if you do deep breathing, it improves your health substantially. So it's an opportunity to get into that deep breathing, which we consciously don't do at other times of the day. And then